Welcome to Aligned to Amplify, and I feel like a cheesy person saying it like that, but that's okay. My name is Sarah Garrison, and I am here with
Haley Lewis.
and we're still trying to figure this all out. You know, we're still in the early stages of recording our podcast with our duct tape and WD-40 setup. So y'all get to join us along for the ride, and you'll notice every week something's going to look different. It just
Absolutely.
is. It is not just our clothes that it's going to look different. It's like we're going to try a new camera setup. You might even be able to see our janky setup someday.
The thing is, though, is that we're going to be able to witness in real time our growth.
I'm excited about that.
Yeah.
And you know what? The thing is that you can't move forward without starting. And if we kept trying to plan and make sure everything was perfect, we would never get started. So why not just make mistakes along the way, and y'all get to learn from our mistakes? And you know, I'm pretty sure we're going to announce when we made another mistake.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
We are the podcast of complete transparency. There is no faking and no fussiness about us. We are setting up our cameras. We turn on the mics and then we talk, and it's for real and it's uncut. So
And we adjust our microphones during the
I
whole
heard
thing.
you do that and it sounds better.
Oh, good. Okay. I was turning it towards my face a little bit more. I'm finding that for some reason, the mic doesn't pick me up as well. Like, we literally adjusted my mic to be more sensitive and her mic to be less sensitive. For some reason, you can't hear me otherwise.
I'm animated, but I'm almost comatose when I talk. And you're like, hey, over here, over here. So
I could have a little dance show over here.
So you almost need like one of those lav mics that like moves with you. So anyway,
Yeah.
and I'm pretty much like I'm right here, deadpan.
And I have this thing with my hands. Like, I like to sit like this, but then we were noticing in editing, my hands are in every one of her
I know.
shots.
She's like, no.
I'm like, how are you doing, Haley? You can't talk to the camera. But not really.
Exactly. So we had a last minute cancellation today. So Sarah and I are hopping on just to do one of our regular chit chats.
Yeah.
And to get into some topics that maybe other people wouldn't be comfortable talking about. So I'm good with that.
I'm good with that too. You know, I was thinking, so today during our hub power working, we got in the subject of COVID.
Oh, and I missed it.
You did. So we talked about like what happened when you had kids. So first of all, just the idea of being isolated for so long. Now, I'm in a unique situation because I never felt that isolation. Before I started doing this, my career path was I was a safety manager for a small staffing agency. Well, it wasn't small. It was a local staffing agency, had 6 offices. We couldn't stay home because we were providing the people that did all of the like
fill-in work.
Like, they were the ones that were making the food that went out to the grocery stores. They were the ones that were in the warehouses.
And with all the new regulations, your job as the safety advisor or liaison or whatever for the state, you were the liaison between the state and the
I had to
companies,
make
correct?
sure all of the COVID rules were being followed for all of these. And it wasn't just the company I work for. It was like all the companies we staffed for. I had to make sure they were within compliance for our employees. So I was never at home. I never had that. I mean, I did feel the isolation because my husband and I, pre-COVID, it's been different since COVID has, you know, all the restrictions have lifted. But pre-COVID, we were going out all the time. We would spend our weekends out paddleboarding, hiking, doing all sorts of outdoorsy fun things. And, you know, when COVID hit, we couldn't do that anymore. I mean, you couldn't go out, like, they shut down everything. And so we were just talking about, like, what it was like to be home alone, what it was like to be home alone with kids. We had one of the people that was there today mentioned that she got so tired of not allowing her kids to play on the playground equipment where she lived that at one point she just went and ripped down the caution tape and let her kids play because they were so wound up. There was nothing
There's
for
like
them to
cabin
do.
fever.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
And was there a negative neighbor Nellie that like reported her or anything?
I mean,
like that?
she
'Cause
didn't
They were out there too, so I'm just curious.
She didn't say anything about that, but she said that like she would find like the fountains that were shut down and let her kid climb on the fountains and stuff. Just anything where she I don't know what kind of child this person had, but their 2-year-old could climb and play that was not caution taped off. So it was just interesting to hear. And another person talked about how they found ways to go camping even though all the campgrounds were shut off, because there still was, and there's still, I'm sure there's still like off-grid camping and things like that where you were just not around people. But it was just interesting to hear how people kind of survived that time frame when you couldn't do anything at all.
Oh yeah.
Like I have a different perspective than even you do, because you had a thriving agency at the time.
I did, and then I had also that injury, March 7th, 2020.
Oh gosh, right
The
before
infamous
everything
day.
shut down.
I fell up the stairs. I know.
That's a real thing, guys. You can really fall up the stairs. It happens. I mean, our president did it.
Yep. Several times. No, it's a real thing, and I got a real injury from it. And thinking, oh, I'll be okay. And then by the time I'm like, oh, I'm not okay, everything was shut down by then. And there was no getting in to see a doctor at all. So finally was able to get in August. So 6 months later, August, and my knee was completely torn. The meniscus was extruded, not repairable. So welcome to my life of disability, because I can't walk, but I can't get surgery either because it's elective.
See, the weirdest thing happened during that time frame. So injuries, like I managed injuries too. And before COVID, people would go to the emergency room for an injury, a work-related injury that was super minor, like maybe a little cut, a little scrape, not anything super serious. That's all right. They have the right to do that. During COVID, I had somebody that had such a bad cut, like deep, like needed stitches cut, absolutely refused to go to the emergency room. I had this person sign all sorts of things. I had this person write out why they didn't, like.
The person refused, or the hospital refused to see
refused.
Them? Okay.
He like flat out just did not want to go see anybody. And so, you have the hospital saying, no, we don't want anybody. But then you had people that were like truly scared to even go in. I kept telling him, like, you need to this needs stitches. Like, this is not something you just sit on. He's like, no, I'll get super glue. And I'm like, no, you're going to.
Well, the fear.
Yeah.
The fear was probably more deadly than the virus.
Yeah.
Which is sad. And we could go on and on and on about that. But
yeah.
I think I have a little bit of PTSD when I talk about COVID and the pandemic shutdown, because I did feel like I was a victim of circumstance. What everybody did. I mean, everybody had their own unique circumstances, but we were so isolated. We're just caught up in our own problems that it was a big, fat pity party for me for several months, because I couldn't move, first of all. Then, let my team go, lose my lease on my studio. Now what do we do? Like, there's, And it took a while for me to get a hold of myself and go, this is not my life. I know that we've been dished a whole lot of really bad stuff right now, but I am not going to sit back and be a victim. And I'm not going to feel sorry for myself anymore. So what has to happen?
That takes a lot when you're isolated.
Yeah.
A lot.
Yeah. You get to know who you are. I know I did.
Yeah. I think the whole world went through that.
A lot of self-discovery.
Mm-hmm.
There's not a whole lot else to do. I mean, people gardened, and I turned into my great-grandma. I was canning like crazy and, prepping like a Mormon. Like seriously, had all of the shelves all loaded. Like I was seriously my great grandma. Oh, and then the college was actually one of the only educational programs. The nursing program at the college was one of the only educational programs that was actually meeting
Oh, really?
over the summer, that was actually having in-person classes. And so the director of that course was reaching out to people, and I responded. And so my daughter and I, we made 130 masks, like those cloth masks. Remember?
Yes, I do remember. My mom made 200 for my company.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
we made cloth masks for all of the nursing students at Mount Hood Community College so they could go in-person learning. And, well, now we know that masks, the effectiveness of masks, but
Oh, that's controversy right there.
oh, did I just open up
You
a can?
just opened it. Well, I got COVID wearing a mask, so I have the viewpoint of why the heck did I mean, I was not anti-mask by any means, like, because I was in the government regulations. I understood that businesses would get in trouble if people didn't wear masks. So I wore a mask because I did not want to harm the businesses. There was a piece of me that, you don't know what you don't know. So, like, I was like, well, okay, if this is going to keep me safe, I'm going to wear it. So when I went into any public places, I would wear it. I wouldn't go and just, like, the people that just didn't wear a mask at all, which is fine. Do you. But I did wear mine because I knew what it was like to be on the receiving end of the government.
Of the regulations.
Yeah,
Yes.
regulations. And so I wore it just for that purpose. But when I got COVID, while wearing a mask, mind you, that was it. I was like, I don't see the point. I still was respectful in, like, small businesses and stuff, but at that point, after I was done with COVID and everything, I'm like, no, this is dumb. Like, if I don't have to wear a mask, I'm not going to. So I would be respectful and wear them where I had to. I wasn't going to, like, pitch a fit and be like, I'm an anti-masker.
Oh, no.
But I also wasn't going to wear a mask if I absolutely didn't have to. And when they got to the spot where it's like, well, if you're vaccinated, you don't have to wear a mask. But if you're unvaccinated, you have to wear a mask. I just got to a point where they're not going to ask me, so I'm not going to wear it, whether I'm vaccinated or not.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I always kind of giggled about the mask. I mean, I wore them, but okay, here it is. If I can smell your cologne, I'm not a scientist, so I don't know, and so I'm not claiming anything. But the skeptic in me, I have a built-in skeptic gene. I'm not sure what that is, but I'll question. I think it comes back to the early 80s that they had that, like, T-shirt campaign. It was like Question Authority, because I was so punk rock. It was so punk rock to, like, not follow the rules, and it was like, okay, yeah, I'm going to question it, and you better have a good answer for me before I comply. And I think that's just carried over throughout my whole life.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm like, I can smell your cologne.
Yeah.
And I'm not a scientist and I don't know, but I'm assuming that if particles of cologne can penetrate a mask, I'm assuming the virus is smaller than that and it can penetrate the mask.
Yeah.
I'm just, no. So that was always do I smell COVID?
Now,
So that's my sense of humor. But, I'm like, I think I smell COVID.
Now, I will say that there's always there's positives to masks, and I do want to at least address that a little bit, because I don't want to seem like we're a total anti-masker. I mean, there were times, like at the company I ran, there's times when you do need masks, and there are certain types of masks that will keep out certain things. N95s, KN95s, we use those like crazy. It was very interesting. Before COVID, like the November of 2019, I had ordered a bunch of N95 masks because we were doing a special project. And then the special project ended and I still had tons of these masks. And so when COVID hit, it was just like, oh, wow, I have this to protect the employees with. Like, we ran out of them very quickly, but it gave us kind of that extra little oomph of, we had this extra stock that, because that project had ended and they were just in the back storage unit, it was a nice thing to have. And I do feel like those, certain masks in certain situations can help. It's just, I don't know how effective it was against COVID, especially seeing that I don't think any of us wore them 100% properly. I mean, for N95s in industry, you have to go through a fit test. They do a smoke test. They do all of this stuff to make sure that you're not getting anything inside that mask. We didn't do that because we don't know that. As the general population, we don't know how to do that. I had to go through special training to do all that stuff. Mm-hmm. So, given the situation, masks can be helpful. And I think that even like cloth masks, like if you're sick and you have a cough, when you cough, your saliva gets out there. Exactly having it on is a good idea if you're going to go in public. But really, like, I think post-COVID, who goes out in public when they have a cold anymore?
Yeah. Well, and me going through the last year of major surgeries, I want my surgical team wearing a mask because you're cutting me open. And I don't know where you've been and what you've done. So I would like you to wear a mask because I am vulnerable at that point. So, being respectful of the vulnerable people, I get it. But I'll also say that there was a lot of, I'm just following the regulations.
That was me.
Because it was outlined, and it seemed like a lot of for show aspects of it. In fact, I actually had COVID when I didn't know I had COVID. I was asymptomatic, but I had it. I went in for my first scheduled knee surgery. They came out and said, we're going to have to give you, they checked me in. I was in the car still. They checked me in and then said, we have to give you a customary COVID test. So we'll be right back. So she was just in scrubs and a clipboard and just regular, hair up in a clip and stuff like that. She comes back out in the bunny suit.
Oh my gosh.
The whole on with the shield and everything, masked up, bunny suit, like the special protective clipboard. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but anyway, special protection on the clipboard. And then gives me my test, so does the swab thing, goes back in, takes it all off because you can't go back all the way in, so you have to strip all the way, all that stuff back off. Came back out with just her scrubs, no mask, regular clipboard to tell me that I tested positive and that they would have to reschedule my surgery. And I was shocked, first of all, that I even had it because I had no symptoms. But I was more entertained by the pomp and circumstance of the test. And even knowing after I tested positive, she came back and she's not all bunny suited up. Like, it was interesting.
Yeah.
But it was not part of their protocol. They have a very specific protocol for the testing part only, but their interaction with the patients was different.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm like, now I tested positive.
Yeah, you should be masked
Why
up.
aren't you bunnies? I mean, why didn't you come out in your protective bubble? I don't understand that. But I didn't understand a lot of what was going on during that time. So I just, I became an amused observer. That was something somebody told me years ago, is like when it is beyond your control and you can't change the circumstances of the situation. You need to take a deep breath, take a step back, and become an amused observer.
Yeah.
I mean, take it all in, watch it, and you can assess your own opinions after that. But don't go kicking and screaming. Don't make a big scene. Because there's nothing you can change. Like, I couldn't kick and scream and tell them, I don't have any symptoms. I don't care. I think your test is wrong. You obviously think my test is wrong too because you came back out without your bunny suit on. It was like, go back home and you can come back in 30 days and we don't have to test you.
Yeah.
That was the other thing. It's like, oh yeah, in 30 days we'll schedule your surgery and we don't have to test you again. So there it is. And maybe we need to have somebody on here that has more inside information into the medical
Yeah.
side of things because I don't know.
Yeah, I think there's like two sides of it is, listen, there's nothing you can do, and so you're just going to go along with it. But then you have the other side that's like, well, wait a minute. If you go along with this, what are you giving up? What more things are going on? Like, if you agree to this, what's the next thing they're going to take away from you? You know, that I think that's why people stood up, is because they felt like it was kind of like a grab for power versus, you know, a health issue. And so they would say, well, why are you just giving in?
Mm-hmm. And I understand the health issue and the vulnerable people. I mean, my mom lived with me at the time, elderly, you know, other underlying circumstances. And I would take it more seriously if I saw a more serious approach from the people in charge about it.
Yeah.
Instead
not
of
seeing
just
all over, like, do this, but then I'm going to go and do what I told you not to do. Like, we saw that a lot from the government officials of, I think it was, I want to think it was the California governor, because California was really super strict. And
are you thinking of the dining?
Yeah, some dinner, went to a dinner party and
at a restaurant.
Yeah, and when no one could even have people over at their house or something like that. But I think there were a lot of those examples of, like, the government officials doing things opposite to what they told us to do. And so I think that's what started bringing up, like, the doubt. And I understand, like, we just need to get, like, at that point, we needed to get out. People were tired of being isolated. They were tired of having all of this stuff. And, I mean, people broke the rules left and right. It's just, if you're a government official and breaking the rules, it's a little different. You're telling us, it's like, do what I say, not as I do.
Well, and that's, you know, my father passed away during COVID. Mm-hmm. He did not pass away from COVID, but it was during 2020. And we weren't allowed to view. We had no viewing. We weren't allowed to have a funeral. We had a small, you know, gathering of people that he was out of state, so we couldn't travel to where he was. There was a lot of, that was hurtful. That was very hard. And seriously, within a week of my father's funeral was that senator's funeral in Georgia, or Senator Lewis, somebody.
I don't know. But that was the one where, like, it was
everybody traveled from D.C. to go to it. They packed the church. And I was in my moment of grief, but I just was like, this isn't right.
Yeah.
And how come? I mean, I had a lot of questions. How come this and not this?
Well,
why didn't my dad get the same? He would have had a huge memorial. Mm-hmm. People loved him.
Yeah. Well, and here 3 years later, we're still asking the questions. There hasn't been answers for that yet. And I don't know if we're ever going to get the answers as to why them and not us.
Yeah. I'm not sure. But being the amused observer, I took it all in.
Yep.
I watched it. I watched everything play out. And quietly formulating an opinion. I am. So, yeah.
So much we could dig deep into with COVID. Like, not just the isolation, not just the masking, not just the
rules for thee and not for me.
Yeah. Like, there's just, it's such a deep topic. And it's so many people are so incredibly passionate about it. I mean, to not talk about it would mean to forget the past 3 years of our lives, you know, because it just, the federal government just took away the state of emergency declaration, like, 3 or 4 months ago. It's been real recent that they took that away.
So it would have been 3 years after the first shutdown.
Exactly. So it's still really fresh in our memories. And I feel like it's a shared collective trauma that we've all gone through. Each one of our traumas have been different, but it's something that we all went through. You know, some of us did lose loved ones to COVID, and some of us, you know, did have issues with the vaccine, and some of us, you know, were perfectly fine. got COVID and had no issues. You know, some of us
Didn't even know.
Yeah,
we had
didn't
it.
even know we had it. So, like, there's just so many varying ways to look at it, but we can't dismiss it. We can't stop talking about it because it upsets people, because everyone has all these different viewpoints and it divides us. I feel like there's some commonalities that we can come to. The isolation, the fear, the pain. I mean, yes, I wasn't as isolated as everybody else because of what I did, but I felt like I lived in constant fear of getting the virus. I was constantly worried about bringing it home to my son, to my parents, because while we didn't live in the same house, we lived on the same property, and I saw them quite often. So there's just, we all have this collective piece of our memory that's never going to go away.
It's a trauma.
It's a trauma.
It's a trauma.
And it's about embracing it, accepting it, and moving on. But we're gonna still talk about it. It's still a piece of it.
It would be like any trauma you experience in your lifetime. If you just shove it down.
Oh gosh. Do you know what happens when you do that?
Well, I'm sure you're going to tell me.
Oh my gosh. You get trauma triggers. Like, and that's PTSD. I call them trauma triggers, but it's really PTSD, where like you're going along and all of a sudden something happens and you just go back to that moment that you may have completely forgotten about. And it just replays in your life. Like, I've been through some stuff in my life where I thought it was good and done and over with. And then all of a sudden I'm put in a situation and I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm back in that abusive relationship. You know, like just things that happen that trigger that piece of me that I thought was healed. You know, and that's, I call them trauma triggers, but I think it's probably called PTSD.
So it's probably a good thing that we work through our trauma because we are the people we are today because of the trauma that we all endured.
Exactly.
And, you know, individually and collectively, which was interesting because, you know, we have kind of a shared trauma.
Yeah.
But it was everybody was unique and individual to them. But it still impacted everyone.
Yep. We're all in this together, but separately together.
And having open dialogue and respectful conversations is important. And I would never want to dismiss anybody's opinion about how they handled COVID or what they feel like now. And I would hope they would respond in kind to me.
And I'd love to have some guests on here to talk more about this.
I would love to have some insights into the medical profession because our medical profession is still in turmoil because of it.
Oh yeah.
And they haven't bounced back. They're still in trauma response for a whole bunch of different reasons. But yeah. Anyway,
I think we're nearing time, so we should probably wrap this up. If you know, if we've pushed a hot button with this topic today, you want to comment on anything, you're welcome to. You know, send us an email.
COVID denier.
It could be angry. It could be happy. You know what? We want the conversation. Let's have a conversation. If you'd like to be a guest on our show, we probably by the time this airs, we'll have an application available that you can sign up, and you know, if it works out, we'll get you on here. We're open to conversations, even if it's something that that doesn't resonate with us. We want, you know, we may not agree with it. It may not resonate with us, but we want to have those conversations because it's important to get the information out to everybody. And
it's the way that you learn too.
Exactly.
By communicating with each other. And honestly, for me, being in the industry of perception, perspective is everything. And understanding the perspective of other individuals that don't believe the way I do or you do or whatever. That's why we have interesting conversations because we align, but sometimes we don't.
Oh, yeah.
So
it's fun when we don't, actually. And hopefully you'll see one of those one of these days.
We're seeking alignment, hence our align to amplify.
Yes.
But yeah, please stick with us as we learn and grow together, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for joining.